Hi, Connor. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Thanks for coming on. Today on our Spotlight On series, we're talking to Connor McCauley, who's looking after sustainability for Jones Lang LaSalle. And he's going to talk to us a little bit about what he does and his experience in the industry, like the prop tech industry, and, some of the blockers we see in diversity and how, he's experienced that in his career. So welcome.
Thanks. Very excited to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do outside of my very brief introduction?
Yeah, sure, Claire. So my role at JLL in Australia is head of sustainability, and I work really closely with a number of different business lines here. The main ones are our property management business. So within that part, we manage, shopping centres, commercial office towers, industrial units, you name it, all across Australia. And we have a team of about 1,200. I also work with leasing agents and our tenant rep business. So they're the ones trying to get all the deals done in these office towers to get people into them or keep them where they are. And then the final section is our industrial and supply chain team. And I think it's fair to say that a lot of our internal people and also our clients now more than ever are really focused on ESG and sustainability and how they can, either design places to be better for the planet and people, or the big thing at the moment is really around climate change and reducing carbon emissions as much as possible.
And you also work in a rep role for diversity in JLL. Can you tell us a little bit about that too?
Yeah, sure. So it's only about a year ago I took on the chair position for our reconciliation action plan. So we currently have an Innovate RAP, which is the second level, and we've had a RAP since 2016. So we've been on the journey for quite a while. I guess JLL is quite a big business. We've got almost 3,500 people across Australia, and we see it as our responsibility to champion reconciliation in all that we do. As I mentioned before, we manage these properties all across the country. We also work on really big government accounts. So part of it is sort of just doing business. I think with those really big corporate or public sector clients, they want us to be championing reconciliation as well. But really it's part of our purpose, which is to shape the future of real estate for a better world. So how can we bring in a diverse workforce, diverse thought in terms of what we're delivering for our clients? I think my role as the chair is really bringing all of these other passionate people within the business. So we've got a working group of about 15 to 20 people who are all really passionate about reconciliation and what more we can do. And what we're doing at the moment is really building up those relationships, building up our partners and supply chain, so working more and more with small Indigenous businesses, but then also showing what leadership we can do in that space as well, and hopefully providing more opportunities for employment within JLL.
It's quite a big remit, really, when you kind of think about the scope of that, the countrywide reconciliations. There's kind of a lot going on there. And I know JLL is very pro-diverse. They partnered with us on events, and I know they do a lot of stuff down in Barangaroo, particularly around Indigenous people. In terms of some of the blockers to diversity, the roadblocks that you guys come up against when you're trying to do this sort of work, what do they look like?
Yeah, look, I'll touch on two things. The first one, I think, is specific to what we're seeing with trying to employ more Indigenous people in our organisation. But I think you can use that same finding or blocker for any part of society that I guess isn't in Australia, we're sort of, and especially in the real estate and property industry, we're sort of dominated by white males. But I'd say, look, one of the biggest blockers is providing a level of showing what the future can hold for a new person in that industry. So really showing them that there are other people from that they can look up to from a mentor perspective or others, and showing them that there is a career path within that industry for you. So whether that is a female, someone of color, a different sexual orientation, having people in leadership positions within that organization and showing them there is a pathway and sort of there is the support within there to be able to get to that position. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges we have is not necessarily attracting those people initially, but then holding on to them.
Yeah, and look, I work in the tech industry, so we have a similar challenge, particularly in the engineering functions. I've talked to you about this before, but where, say you're a female particularly, and you go in to even uni, you go in on your first day, and there's you and 200 guys. You're kind of going, am I supposed to be in this room? So that slows on then to when we put out jobs or other. I think every tech company I've spoken to has this problem. They'll put up an engineering job and they might get one not white male applicant, maybe, and that's part of the challenge too, right? Like say, it's kind of having enough people in the industry that then more people want to join the industry.
Yeah, and like I think there's some interesting ways that companies and businesses are looking at their recruitment process, and you would have come across the term of like unconscious bias, and I think a really great initiative to overcome that was doing, when you're initially reviewing CVs, doing them in a blind way. So taking out any pictures or names or any other factors within a CV that can show that could potentially result in unconscious bias. Because then you're really just basing it on the facts and their experience and not your own biases around what your employee of choice might look like. So I think different ways of going around recruitment, and it also comes to writing the CVs. Like we found the way we were trying to engage some or get some Indigenous people to put forward for us to put forward for our graduate recruitment process. But I think the way we'd written our CVs was really corporate heavy, with all of the sort of wording and jargon and saying they have to have a tertiary degree or 5 years of experience or whatever it might be. And that can be quite off-putting for someone who doesn't have that level of experience.
Yeah, and someone who might not understand the corporate jargon, because I know that even with people I know in my own circle who aren't in corporate land, I'll say something to say you or like a friend of mine who has a similar job to me, and they'll know what I'm talking about, and then I'll say it to someone who's not in like that corporate space, and they'll go, what? Like, what does that mean? What is that? What is a tertiary? Like, what does that even mean? Like,
yeah, exactly. And I think what we need to be conscious of is it's not, we can't just always do things the same way we've done them and just use a LinkedIn post to put out a job description and expect the same people to go onto that. It has to be through different channels. We have to work with other people, that even diverse recruiters, so recruiters that are actively looking for more diverse candidates, and get consultation from them on how we should be writing, how we should be engaging with a different sector of society, instead of just tertiary educated people from this certain demographic.
100%. And I think a lot of companies are really taking conscious, active steps to make changes, particularly in the last few years. It seems to have become a lot more prevalent, and like, for want of a better way of putting it, they're kind of putting their money where their mouth is. And we've seen that a lot with like event sponsors and companies who've gotten involved with the GU around like helping us run events, or pushing messages out to their staff, or that kind of thing, where they're really keen to find a way to create more diversity in their organizations. And sometimes the blockers is that, like, see, they've had like a system for so long, and now it's like, where do we even start with changing the system or updating it to make it a bit more inclusive?
Yeah. And I'd say, like, the other challenge we have at the moment is this term like the war on talent as well. Like, it is actually difficult. We've got a few different factors, and like we come across this in the real estate sector a lot, is that the balance of power, if you want to call it that much, with attracting people has sort of moved from, we're saying in the real estate space, from the landlord to the tenant. So now the tenant can demand more from the landlord in the negotiations because there is more vacant space. But then also within an organization, it's moved from the employer to employees who are, they want to have more hybrid working, they want to be more flexible, they want to have more amenities. Employees have more power now than they ever had before, and it's hard in the recruitment space, no doubt.
Mate, let me tell you, in tech world, that is, the war for talent is like, it's a real thing, like particularly like super technical roles or niche technical roles. It's definitely a real thing. So that's also it, right? You're kind of sometimes trying to draw from a very limited pool. Like, you might get 4 applicants for a job, so like how much diversity are you getting? 4 people applied. And I think that's a uniquely Australia thing. I've been here for almost a decade, and there's been a skill shortage the entire time I've been here.
Yeah, I think, well, I guess what else we're seeing, I guess with the opening up of borders now in Australia, we're getting a lot more international students coming in, and I guess international workers as well. So we will see more diversity, more options, and more skilled people coming from, I guess, mainly in the Asia Pac region, but also in other geographical regions as well. So yeah, hopefully again that opens up diversity and options, with great candidates from all across the world.
With any luck, it would definitely be a positive. We're almost out of time, so just on a slightly lighter note, what is something that people might not know about you?
I have two beautiful children, a 6-year-old boy named Killian and a 4-year-old girl named Riley. And I think, look, when I think about what I do and why I do it in the sustainability space, it's often around that next generation. And I think a big part of what it is around climate change and making sure that we're not ruining the world any more than we already have. But socially, I think is a really important thing. And a lot of businesses are now focusing on how they want their organization to look in 5, 10, or 15 years time, who they want to have in that place. And I'm really excited that that they're looking at it through a really open lens and bringing in a lot of different people from different backgrounds, different cultures. And I think that's just going to make for a more dynamic and interesting workplace that is more inclusive. Really excited to see how that looks in the next 5 to 10 years.
Amazing. And thank you so much for coming on to talk to us. I think this has been really informative.
Okay. Thanks, Claire. Thanks a lot for your time.